The dragon in the rain. Bad decisions never come with warning labels. They slip into your life quietly, like uninvited guests who end up burning down your house. That's exactly how Corporal Henry, Hank Morrison found himself kneeling in the pouring rain, offering medical supplies to what was unmistakably a dragon. The creature was magnificent and terrifying, obsidian scales that gleamed like polished armor, amber eyes that seemed to glow with ancient intelligence, and claws that could probably slice through his military-grade equipment like butter. It was also clearly injured, favoring its left wing and breathing in shallow, pained gasps. "All right, easy now," Hank muttered, holding out the small white medical kit. The Red Cross symbol seemed almost comically inadequate in this situation. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon tilted its massive head, studying him with those penetrating eyes. It was bigger than anything that had a right to move so silently. Hank only noticed it when the creature was already close enough to count his teeth. Rain streamed off its scales, creating small rivers in the mud around its feet. "Just take it," Hank said, nudging the box forward. "Or don't, but if you eat me, this whole first contact thing is going to be really awkward to explain." The dragon let out a low, rumbling sound, somewhere between a purr and distant thunder. It leaned forward, sniffed the medical kit with surprising delicacy, then gently plucked it from Hank's hands with two claws. The creature examined the device, turning it over as if reading instructions, before accepting it with what Hank could only describe as a begrudging nod. "Great," Hank exhaled, relief flooding through him. "So now we're friends." The dragon blinked slowly, then made a sound that might have been agreement or indigestion. Without warning, it spread its massive wings, launched itself into the stormy sky, and vanished into the darkness. Hank stood there, thoroughly soaked and completely bewildered. "That's definitely going to be a problem," he muttered to himself. As it turned out, he was absolutely right. The arrival. The next morning brought visitors, the kind that arrive without knocking and leave without asking permission. When people imagine alien air forces, they usually picture sleek warships or intimidating battle cruisers. What actually descended on Hank's makeshift outpost was somehow worse, a squadron of immaculately organized, humorless extraterrestrials in perfect uniforms who radiated the kind of bureaucratic menace that could crush souls with paperwork alone. Hank barely had time to take a sip of his disappointingly lukewarm coffee before a very tall, very unimpressed alien officer materialized in front of him. The being had pale blue skin and an expression that suggested he'd already written Hank off as a statistical error. "Human Morrison," the officer intoned, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "You are hereby detained for gross violations of interstellar non-interference policies." Hank blinked. "Ah." The officer's left eye twitched, a sure sign of a bureaucrat who'd dealt with humans before and was already regretting it. "You made contact with a Class 7 prohibited entity." "You mean the dragon?" The officer's jaw tightened visibly. "That was no dragon." Hank considered this, looking down at his coffee and back up. "Looked like a dragon to me." "It is a Xilian warborn," the officer continued with strained patience. "An autonomous bioweapon from the Annihilation Wars. Its mere existence is classified under Galactic Treaty 492 Alpha." "Right," Hank said slowly. "So, still a dragon." The officer inhaled very slowly, the kind of breath that suggested he was mentally counting to 10 in multiple languages. "Human, your actions have potentially destabilized an entire sector. The Xilian species was declared eradicated 5 centuries ago. If one is alive, it's not supposed to be." Hank sipped his regrettable coffee. "Let me get this straight, I helped an injured creature, and now I'm being arrested because it was supposed to be extinct?" "You assisted an active war relic capable of planetary-scale destruction. Didn't seem that destructive to me. Just kind of, wet." That's when the alarms started blaring. Return of the Dragon. Red lights flashed like an angry disco as the transport ship above them suddenly broke formation, its synchronized precision dissolving into chaos. A deep, unholy roar echoed across the valley, and Hank found himself looking up with a mixture of awe and the distinct feeling that his day was about to get significantly worse. The dragon didn't just descend from the storm clouds, it tore through them like a living missile launched by some vengeful deity who'd decided diplomacy was overrated. Lightning arced off its obsidian scales as the alien forces scrambled below, their perfect organization now replaced by panicked shouting and the kind of disorganized scurrying that suggested no one had prepared for an allegedly extinct city-obliterating bioweapon showing up unannounced. The lead officer, Hank had mentally dubbed him Lieutenant No Fun, whipped around, his immaculate uniform somehow still crisp despite everything falling apart around them. His pale blue skin had gone a shade lighter, the universal sign of a bureaucrat realizing someone else would have to fill out a lot of paperwork. Hank, meanwhile, took another sip of his increasingly disappointing coffee and muttered, "Well, that's a development." The dragon landed with a thunderous impact that sent shockwaves through the ground, knocking over equipment, personnel, and one particularly unfortunate alien soldier who'd been trying to run in two directions at once. Its enormous claws dug into the mud, steam rising from its rain-soaked scales. But this time, the dragon wasn't alone. 3 more shapes emerged from the storm clouds, smaller but no less magnificent. Dragons of different colors and sizes, each bearing the same ancient intelligence in their glowing eyes. They landed in formation around their larger companion, creating a semicircle that effectively trapped the alien forces. "Oh," said Lieutenant No Fun, his voice suddenly very small. "There are more of them." The original dragon, Hank's dragon, he realized with a start, fixed its amber gaze directly on him. In its claws, it still carried the medical kit he'd given it the night before. But now the small white box was glowing with a soft, ethereal light that definitely hadn't been there before. The dragon approached slowly, ignoring the weapons now trained on it from every direction. It stopped directly in front of Hank and, with infinite care, placed the transformed medical kit at his feet. "I think," Hank said quietly, "it's trying to return the favor." Understanding. The glowing medical kit at Hank's feet pulsed with warm light, and suddenly he understood things he had no business understanding. Images flooded his mind, not invasive or overwhelming, but gentle, like memories being shared between old friends. He saw the truth, these weren't bioweapons at all. The Xelians had been guardians, protectors of worlds caught in the crossfire of the annihilation wars. They'd been declared extinct not because they'd been destroyed, but because they'd chosen to hide, to sleep, to wait for a time when they might be needed again. The dragon, his dragon, had been injured not in battle, but while protecting a small colony from raiders. Hank's simple act of kindness had awakened something that had been dormant for centuries, hope. "They're not weapons," Hank said softly, looking up at Lieutenant No Fun. "They're healers. Guardians. The medical kit, it's showing me." The officer's expression shifted from bureaucratic annoyance to genuine concern. "Human, step away from the device. We don't know what." "They've been watching," Hank continued, his voice growing stronger. "Waiting to see if any of us were worth saving. Worth protecting." He looked around at the alien forces, then at the dragons surrounding them. "This isn't an invasion. It's a job interview." The lead dragon made a sound, not quite speech, but unmistakably communication. The other dragons responded in kind, and Hank felt understanding flow through him like warm honey. "They're offering alliance," he translated, amazed at his own certainty. "Protection for worlds that show compassion. They're tired of hiding while innocent people suffer." Lieutenant No Fun looked between Hank and the dragons, his training warring with the evidence before his eyes. "The treaties were written by people who never met them," Hank interrupted. "People who were afraid of what they represented." He gestured to the dragons, magnificent and patient in the rain. "They're not asking to rule or conquer. They're asking to help." The officer was quiet for a long moment, rain streaming down his face. Finally, he lowered his weapon. This will require significant paperwork." Hank grinned. "I think they're okay with that." The new alliance. 6 months later, Hank stood in the same muddy field where it all began, but everything had changed. Where once there had been a lonely outpost, now there was a thriving embassy, a beautiful fusion of human engineering, alien technology, and dragon architecture that somehow worked perfectly together. The Zillion Accord, as the historians were calling it, had reshaped interstellar politics overnight. Worlds that had lived in fear of raiders and natural disasters now had protectors, ancient, wise beings who asked for nothing more than the chance to help those who showed kindness to others. Lieutenant No Fun, whose real name turned out to be Commander Vex 9, had indeed filled out significant paperwork. He'd also been promoted 3 times and now served as the primary liaison between the Galactic Council and the Zillion Guardians. He still looked perpetually concerned, but now it was the productive kind of concern that came with meaningful work. The Andromedan colonies are requesting assistance with their asteroid problem, he reported to Hank, who had somehow found himself appointed as the official human Zillion ambassador, a job he'd never applied for but couldn't bring himself to quit. Tell them Kithra's flight will be there next week, Hank replied, watching as his original dragon friend supervised a group of young dragons learning to work with the colony's medical teams. The big dragon had chosen the name Kithra, which apparently meant, bridge builder, in the old language. The irony wasn't lost on Hank that his worst decision, helping an unknown creature in the rain, had become the best thing he'd ever done. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor about these things. A young dragon, barely larger than a horse, bounded over with the enthusiasm of a puppy. It dropped a flower at Hank's feet, a gift from the gardens they'd helped establish on a previously barren world. "Thank you, Nexus," Hank said, scratching the young dragon behind the ridge of scales just above its eyes. The dragon purred, a sound like distant thunder on a summer evening. Kithra approached, moving with the grace of centuries. The great dragon touched its nose gently to Hank's shoulder, their usual greeting, and shared a brief image, hundreds of worlds, thousands of species, all connected by threads of compassion and mutual aid. It was, Hank reflected, a pretty good outcome for a decision made in the rain. As the twin suns set over the embassy, casting long shadows across the peaceful valley, Hank Morrison, former corporal, current ambassador, accidental dragon whisperer, smiled and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new worlds to help, new alliances to forge. But tonight, he was content to know that sometimes, the best things in life really do come from the worst decisions. The end.